I was going to say something about the 70th anniversary of the founding of the PRC, which is being celebrated today. I have a lot of things to say about that, and yeah, stay tuned for videos specifically about that. But I came across a link to a report that states Jeremy Corbyn wants school children to learn the negative side of the British Empire. And this made me feel this would be a good talking point for this video. I don't intend to make this very in-depth, very comprehensive, just lay out some basic thoughts I have on this. Um, I believe that the most forward-looking nations, the most progressive nations, are those that can be honest about their past. That, to me, is what sets aside a democracy and open society from a dictatorship. Um, in a world where nationalism and patriotism can run very strong, sometimes that can feel like giving ground. It can feel like a weakness. I don't feel it necessarily is. However, I feel a much more balanced approach is necessary. So, thinking of the British Empire, largest empire in history, vast, vast in size, vast in influence. It built the modern world. Okay, that's irrefutable to me. Um, if we look at the negative side, there's plenty of examples of this, right? The empire was built on exploitation. It was built on exploiting the colonized peoples. It was built in exploiting the resources from colonized lands. And we cannot escape from the fact that cities like Bristol and Liverpool and London were made wealthy on the backs of the transatlantic slave trade. This is just a fact. Although Britain was one of the first major powers also to abolish slavery, and it's sometimes conveniently forgotten that Royal Navy sailors risked their lives for much of the 19th century infiltrating slaving ships. It's also conveniently forgotten that whilst we were absolutely central, obviously, to the transatlantic triangle, we didn't just go in and take the slaves, they were sold. And this is something Pan Africanists don't want to admit, but their fellow Africans sold fellow black Africans to the white slave trade. It's just a fact. Not to mention the Arab slave trade, which still prevails. But anyway, yes, we need to look at that. We need to look at atrocities in India and Ireland and elsewhere. Um, we've just seen the 100th anniversary of Amritsar this year. The British Empire has a lot of blood on its hands, had a lot of blood on its hands. There's no question about that. No question at all. But I would make the point, if you're going to look at a power that essentially was a superpower for a century and was a major power for a long time before that, in that period of time, of course, there are going to be negative aspects. And I challenge anyone who wants to single the British Empire out. Look at any hegemony, look at any power, whether it be the United States over the last 70 years, whether it be the Soviet Union, whether it be China, whether it be France at the peak of French power. You take any great power, it has blood on its hands. Of course, China doesn't admit its wrongs, but you know, that's just a hallmark of a totalitarian state. Um, so if Mr. Corbyn wants children to learn the negative aspects of this, by the way, unless I'm mistaken, the slave trade is already taught. That's okay. I'm not opposed to it in principle, but it needs to be understood in the context that this is the nature of empires and all empires do it. I mean, the Mongol Empire didn't spread by peace, it spread by bloody conquest. Yet Genghis Khan is hailed up as a great hero, a great national hero of Mongolia. Um, the ancient Chinese empires were constantly at war. Okay, so if you're going to judge the British, then judge other powers as well. And given that we were the largest, were we the worst? I would argue no. Look at the Belgians. Look at what the Belgians done in the Congo. So that needs to be considered in context. And it's not justification. I'm not saying all the context means it's okay. I'm just saying if you're going to judge the British, and actually Professor Neil Ferguson made this point in his excellent book Empire, which contrary to what the critics say is not a defensive empire, it's a balanced argument about empire. He does include the negative. And this is my problem with Jeremy Corbyn's school of thought. If we look at the British Empire, it shaped the modern world. It gave the world the Westminster system. It gave the world trial by jury. It gave the world the spread of the English language, which has enabled endless communications. It has gave the world some great innovations and inventions. We were the world's first industrialized country. We gave the world infrastructure. We gave the world industrialization. Yes, it was on the backs of exploited labor. I get that. But the point is the ingenuity and the creativity and the innovation of this country, that side has to be looked at as well. And my problem with the left wing blame the West first attitude, and I'm not talking about all left leaning people. Ironically, James Ramsay MacDonald, the first Labour Prime Minister, was quite pro empire. But the thing is, you need to have a balance. And you get two schools of thought. Okay, you do get revisionists who want to say it was all good and they do want to downplay the bad side. But then you get this side of the left that just says, oh, the British Empire was evil, we must bow our heads in shame. My question is, if the Americans, the Russians, the Chinese, and almost every other great power can be proud of their success, the height of their power, why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't this island nation, this small island nation, that was once dismissed as primitive by the Romans, be proud of the fact that we once essentially ruled the world? I defy anyone else to say they wouldn't be proud of their nation in that sort of situation. And as for this is another controversial point, but it has to be said. If we look at, for example, the arrival of Captain James Cook in Australia and in New Zealand, one of there was a recent controversy where Maori said, "Oh, we shouldn't be celebrating colonialism." Well, the Maoris are a warrior culture. Okay, if they had the same means the British had, they would have been conquering other lands. In fact, they did, which I made a recent video on. So if it is a little bit of hypocrisy from certain indigenous people, I'm just going to say it. This notion that the evil Europeans came in and just killed everyone in sight. And, there was no, for example, if we look at the Americas, there was no warfare or no subjugation prior to European arrival. It's just nonsense. There were entire tribes wiped out by other tribes and bands and groups of indigenous people. It's just a fact. It doesn't justify what we done. It doesn't justify the exploitation. It doesn't justify the Trail of Tears. I know all that, right? But I'm sick and tired of this attitude that the evil British can be, just demonized, and the French get the same treatment, but particularly the British because we were so big, um, whilst ignoring the fact that it's human nature. If you have the arms and the means for power, you will take it. We did. And we had a lot of skeletons in our closet, and we shouldn't hide that. We shouldn't whitewash it. But let's just have a balanced account of empire. Let's talk about what Britain gave the world as well, because this left wing idea, well, rather this Corbynite idea, we need to bow our heads in shame. I think it's tantamount to disrespecting our national flag. I think it's tantamount to saying, "Oh, we're going to self shame." It's almost like the old communist struggle sessions. This is my crimes, but we're going to ignore um, or downplay what other powers have done. I think that's wrong.